cloud, so that's going to be available to the Fairtrade Foundation. I think that is now recording. Yeah, you should have had a message saying that you're being recorded. Could somebody give me a thumbs up that you've been told that you're being recorded? Yep, great, jolly good, splendid. So, well, good evening and welcome to Fairtrade Vox Pops, facilitated by Brent Fairtrade Network here in London. This is part of the Choose the World You Want Festival, which is hosted online by the Fairtrade Foundation. And we're celebrating Fairtrade Fortnight, which began yesterday. Our agenda is very simple. We're going to show a short film, which I'll introduce in a moment, which is about 11 minutes long. And then we'll discuss some of the issues raised for fair trade, particularly for fair trade activists, like many of us are, the issues raised by the film. And then there may be some time left over when we can just talk to each other about anything else to do with fair trade. But in any case, we'll close by 8 o'clock. So that's the shape of the evening: film, discussion, bit of time for networking, or not if people don't want to, and then close by 8 o'clock. So let's talk a little bit about the film. This film was filmed and superbly edited by Mayazu Roberts, to whom we're deeply grateful. And I'm actually very grateful also to Emily Raymond, who's on this call, not only for introducing us to Maya, but actually having the idea of this whole film in the first place. So it's thanks to our Vice Chair, Emily, that we have this evening. So what we did on the 5th of February, 2.5 weeks ago, a group of us went to a couple of shops here in Brent. One was the Co-op in Queen's Park, and the other was another shop nearby, Planet Organic. And we're very grateful to those two shops because they allowed us to film inside the shop, which you can't always do. So we asked Sainsbury's, for example, and they wouldn't allow us to film inside the shop. But Co-op and Planet Organic did. And as people came through the door, we waylaid them. This was primarily done by Councillor Orleen, who is also on this call. We waylaid them and said, would you mind answering a few questions about fair trade on camera? And if they said no, we said thank you and go away. But if they said yes, then Emily later chased them up and got their signature. So we actually have people's signatures for being filmed and recorded and placed on the Fairtrade Foundation website. So I asked people a basic question: what does fair trade mean to you? And then depending on their answers, I answered just one or two kind of follow-up questions, as you'll see. And Maya captured, I think it's about 14 different people. So you have quite a few different voices responding to that question and the follow-up. So without further ado, Emily, shall we show the film? Are you sharing screen? You've got the right sound, but not the picture.
No, hang on.
Ah, great.
Something strange.
What does fair trade mean to you?
It means ensuring that ingredients and products
1 moment, please.
from from a source that's fair, the workers are treated fairly and paid fairly, and and good quality.
Fair trade for me means something that when you buy from like outer country, like from like outside Europe, we mean that we pay a fair price.
Right, I'm going to try that again.
What does fair trade mean to you?
It means ensuring that ingredients and products are sourced from a source that's fair, that the workers are treated fairly and paid fairly, and and that good quality.
Fair trade for me means something that when you buy from like outer country, like from like outside Europe, we mean that we pay a fair price, and as well we respect the rules. I mean the transport, fair pay for the locals and everything. That means and organic, of course, and everything. That's what it means for me.
Great. No, well, thank you. That's great. And so, do you look for fair trade when you're shopping?
Yes.
How do you know whether a product is fair trade?
Well, obviously the label. I trust the label. This is why I think I need to trust. So this is why I would rather buy from small shops where I trust them. I would say. So I don't know if they are or not. I can't put but this is how I do. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but I'm trying.
I think it means to me that producers are avoiding selling to the multinationals when selling to smaller traders, and thereby avoiding the very cheap prices that the multinationals will offer, so that the farmers are getting a better.
I would say that it means that there's a chain of provenance, let's say, with a product, and that from the source to the supermarket, the way that it's produced is not exploitative, and everyone within that chain is being paid fairly, and it's ethically sourced. I guess that's
so it sounds like you're quite keen on this idea.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
Probably denotes using products that are sourced ethically in terms of workers' rights, wages, etc., etc.
Great. No, that's excellent. And so, do you buy a lot of fair trade products yourself?
I don't particularly think about it, but there's certain companies or products that I boycott because I understand the practices are unfair. But it's not something I'm conscious about when I go into a shop. Most products are not fair trade products.
No. It means mainly ethical producers and ethical transport and all that. Just generally trade that doesn't damage the planet and trade that's fair for consumers and producers alike.
Great. What does fair trade mean to you?
Quite a lot, actually.
Oh, right.
Yes, I bought some Fairtrade Fortnight in my bag. I never buy anything else. Food that's been produced by a company who have paid their workers a good price, a livable price on their wages.
Right. So that sounds as though you're pretty keen on the idea.
Yes, I am.
So do you look out for fair trade products when shopping?
I do. I think if I can find it, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
In preference to the other things, which is why I'm nearly always here first.
Great. Well, here, as in the co-op rather than other shops. That's interesting. And why is that? Why are you looking for fair trade products?
Well, I just think we're cheating people without realising it most of the time.
Yeah.
We're not looking to who's doing the work, where it's actually coming from.
Right. So it's the producers themselves you're particularly interested in supporting.
Honestly, I haven't only heard of it, like, when I buy bananas, I just see the logo fair trade on it.
Yes.
So I already know about it, to be honest.
So well, the leaflet will help you. It's mainly about helping producers of goods in poorer countries so they can work their way out of poverty. So do you buy a lot of bananas, coffee, chocolate, sugar, tea? All those, there are lots of fair trade goods, particularly.
Like ethical farming.
Right, ethical farming,
Organically produced sometimes. Where it comes from, the local where it comes from. Assisting the community in helping.
Yep.
Like
creating jobs,
Right.
etc. for them in the community, stuff like that.
It means produce that's produced with fair wages and good working conditions.
Great, brilliant summary, actually. Thank you. So, do you look for fair trade products when you're
I do,
shopping?
yeah. Well, actually, to be honest, the products I buy mainly bananas, Fairtrade bananas.
Right.
And those are the ones that I'm aware of and that I buy.
Right.
So I'm probably less aware of other products. But bananas, certainly, I'd always pick Fairtrade bananas over non-Fairtrade bananas.
I'd say fair trade is about, I would say, the process in which, like the food that we eat, and using resources in a way that's good for the environment, good for the people that are actually consuming the food, and everyone else involved, so the environment, the animals, the people, everybody, and it being done fairly, people getting equal pay, for their time and the value that they're giving, making it fair, it says it in the word, so yeah.
Final question, would you like to see more fair trade products in this store?
I think not just in the store, but all over.
Yeah,
We
great.
have a responsibility to society as a whole.
Great.
And the whole thing about fair trade is that it's exploitive. And you never exploit your own, you always exploit others.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. Would you like to see more fair trade products
Well,
here?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, I think I see coffee and tea. I sort of expect.
Yes.
Bananas, beans.
Thank you.
I'd be delighted to see more.
Right.
I'm sure there are more.
There are 6,000 altogether, but it's growing all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if it would be possible to do fair trade for things like cotton and other non-vegetable.
Yes. Moving away from food.
Moving away from
Yes.
food. Yeah.
Yes. Try and buy fair trade products.
Yeah, most definitely.
Right. And would you like to see more fair trade products in this store?
Yes.
That's great.
As long as it's not made turned into a profitable way, as long as
Yes.
the actual where it comes from, the environment, the country, they're benefiting from.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
What sort of products would you like to see added?
Well, the thing about fair trade is that it only applies to products that are coming from abroad, which means that all the shoes I've bought, it's not fair trade, but one hopes that it's been produced under reasonably good conditions. So if I'm buying local stuff, I would tend to buy organic if it's available.
Right.
It will help people from less food to
Right.
grow. I think you could.
Yeah. And would you like to see more fair trade products here?
Certainly.
What sort of things would you like to see added?
The teas and the coffees.
Yes.
Food that's grown maybe where they don't, in countries that don't always pay their workers a good wage for their family.
Right.
I wouldn't say I actively look for them, but I do notice them, and if I can buy fair trade, and I do. I have a choice, and it's affordable, and it's something I want, then I would lean towards fair trade. Yeah.
Very good. Do you look for fair trade products when you go shopping?
I am vegan myself.
Great.
And getting organic fair trade products is something that's important to me. Definitely.
Yes.
How do you know whether a product is fair trade?
Well, obviously the label. I trust the label. This is why I think I need to trust. So this is why I would rather buy from small shops where I trust them. I would say so. I don't know if they are or not. I can't put my but. This is how I do. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but I'm trying.
No, it's great. And this logo is the indication.
Exactly. Yes.
So you would like to see more fair trade here as Spanish organic? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think Waitress has it as well.
Yes.
So I know it's a brand that is a supermarket that has it as well. So yeah, I think it's about the quality as well. We want, if you pay more, I think you want to have the quality as well. So it's about that as well.
Good. I'd like to ask you as an employee of the co-op, what does fair trade mean to you?
No idea. No idea.
That's really interesting. So have you seen this logo on my shirt before?
Never.
That's really interesting because there's some ice cream here, the flowers, chocolate, tea, coffee, lots of goods here. Fairtrade's trying to help producers in poorer countries by giving them a fair pay for the work they do. and guarantee good working conditions. Does that sound a good idea to you?
Yeah, it does sound like a good idea. Yeah, it does.
So maybe you might
making more, making more money again.
Yeah, so that people can work their way out of poverty. Yeah. Good. Well, I hope you'll be able to encourage your customers to buy Fairtrade goods, because we think it does lots of good. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, well, thank you very much, Emily, and thank you very much to Maya, our skilled camera woman and editor of that film. It's absolutely fascinating. So, thank you very much, and thank you for those who starred in it, which I think on this call is just Ruth, with my voice off screen. So,
all in the background.
And all in the background. That's right. Great. So that was the film, and what I suggest we do now is just discuss some of the points which are raised by it. If you want to say something, you can try raising your hand physically. I may miss that, so it's probably better if you use the facility called reactions along the bottom of the Zoom menu at the bottom, and that gives you something called raise hand, so which both Councillor Orlean and Nana have both done already, and Joanna, so that's great. So looking for reactions, and in particular, just feeling, what do you feel about what you've heard? Is it surprising? Is it worrying? Is it welcome? Joanna, as you're furthest away from Brent among the people I know here, would you like to start?
So I think that one of the really interesting things was, obviously almost everybody that responded had a sense of what fair trade is, and almost all of them were mostly right. Some of them had got things a little bit mixed up, but the thing that really struck me was right at the end when you asked the supermarket worker, and he was prepared to say that he didn't know what fair trade was, which is actually kudos to him for saying that on camera. But I think that's quite bad. I think that's one of the important things. One of the important things about having a fair trade mark is that you can go into a supermarket and you don't have to ask the question, where does this come from? Lots of people are time poor, and they're in a supermarket and they want to be a really easy sort of rule of thumb. Yeah, this is fair trade. You go into a fair trade shop, you can ask the staff and they will know, and they will be able to tell you, and they will at length, where everything comes from and how it was sourced and how it was made. But you don't get that with supermarkets, and that's why the fair trade mark is so important, because you can't rely on the staff being trained to know what fair trade is. And if you've got that mark on that product, it's our job to educate the public what that means. And once the public have got a sense of it, then they'll know to look for it. But yeah, I think there's definitely an argument that we should be training up our supermarket staff better.
Yeah, and it's particularly striking, of course, it was the Co-op, which is probably more explicitly pro-fair trade than any other supermarket.
Yeah, indeed. I've got a Co-op at the end of my road, and it's got the fair trade mark outside on a sort of permanent standing on the roadside to say that they support fair trade. So, but I haven't yet had conversations with the staff about it.
Might be worth doing. Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Joanna. Councillor Orlean, you were there on the spot. How is the film, and what comments do you have?
Right, I thought the film was very good. There's interesting points that were actually raised. One of the things that popped out to me a little bit in the film, when people mentioned they didn't have homegrown stuff in there, they mentioned it's all from abroad. And the other thing that popped out to me is that the perception that fair trade goods are only in smaller shops. Right, and also my last point is, I'm not sure how feasible this is, making the label a little bit larger, so it's quicker to see. And my last point is that when it comes to food, I haven't worked in a food shop. When it comes to food, hardly any staff would actually understand what it means. The primary aim is to get the stock out there, get it filled, and that's it. But that could be something you could look at to ask shops, all shops, to actually incorporate it into their training, because it can be done.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of turnover of staff, so presumably there's a lot of training going on all the time.
All the time, yeah. So it would be good. And I do remember working Marks and Spencer, we were trained on a regular basis, so that could be incorporated into it.
Great.
Yeah, that was all.
No, that's great. So several interesting new points there about this perception that it's small shops and small companies. One person said, of course, it doesn't involve multinational companies, and making the label larger and training the shops. Great, thank you. Nana, you also had your hand up early on.
Yes, thank you. I mean, first of all, thank you for the work put into the film, and indeed, we need to thank Maya. It's been brilliantly edited. What struck me was the statement, "I trust the label," and I think for me, it shows that Fairtrade needs to be doing more about capitalizing on its name, because people are trading off it. If I remember that debacle with Sainsbury's a few years ago when they wanted to change from Fairtrade to Fairly Traded, which in a sense was using the, I would say, the kudos of Fairtrade and without paying or doing what Fairtrade stands for. So I think it's not just supermarket staff who need training. I think we ourselves need to be more confident about telling people what the 5 things are that Fairtrade stands for, and maybe shouting it off the rooftops. Because I was surprised going to, there was a small enterprise in my church, and I was talking to somebody who was working on it. It's a little coffee thing, and he said, "Oh, we have a single source of the coffee," and I said, "But that's not fair trade." And he was surprised. I said, "There's no Fairtrade premium." And I explained what the premium was. He said, "Oh, so fair trade is different." I said, "Yes, you might be doing something ethical, something very good, but let's be clear what fair trade is." And maybe there needs to be more of us saying, this is what fair trade is. It's really something it's the gold standard, really. And we say it, but we should mean it. And we need to actually let people understand what it is. So for me, that is really what we need to do. Build on, I trust the label.
Great, yes. So trust the label, make sure the label's visible, and build people's understandings of what the label stands for. Yeah, great, thank you. Janice.
Well, I wish we could have shut up those self-checkout machines, though. That annoyed me a little bit. A lot of people seem to equate fair trade with organic and vegan. I know a lot of it is, but it isn't all organic. So we need to get that across. And did we actually have the logo in the film? Because I know it can be edited in, but it didn't feature. It could feature a little bit more in the actual film itself. And I know we were talking about the size. I've got a bar of Tony's Chocolonely here, and it's got the smallest logo on the back in the top corner. It's not even on the front. So they're not really marketing themselves as fair trade. And also it was a small convenience size co-op store. I don't think they're actually that good at promoting fair trade compared to the bigger ones. The one that I use by Willesden Green Station, you've got very few fair trade products in there. I think it's the bigger co-ops promote it an awful lot more. And I know we have a high turnover in staff in the small convenience ones, because the first manager in the one in Queen's Park was actually very pro fair trade, but he moved on.
That's right, he moved on within a few months, I know. It's extraordinary how quickly it changed. But no, thank you. I think the logo is there. Good point about logo in the film. I think it's there on the products at the start, but yeah, we should maybe have sort of held up a great big logo at some point. Great, thank you. Thank you, Janice. Sophie.
I thought that I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was a great thing to do, because it's good to remind ourselves on what people understand. I think it's good to listen carefully to what people are saying, because none of them really said what fair trade is. So none of them said that it was about the people who grow the products and about them getting a guaranteed minimum price and a social premium. And so I think that's quite interesting, because they were talking about the whole supply chain, and they were talking about people being paid proper wages. And although obviously we hope that's the case, that's actually not really the bit that we're looking at. And so I think we shouldn't sort of pat ourselves on the back too much in terms of thinking that people have got what the message is. What was good was they clearly thought it was a good thing, and quite a lot of them thought that they would look out for these products and buy them. I thought the little girl was smashing in terms of she also brought in the whole idea of climate and environment. So she sort of saw it in a bigger picture about things being ethically sourced. I think the thing about the shop worker was very disappointing, and it was particularly disappointing to me because this must be my 22nd Fairtrade Fortnight. And on that first one that I did, it was just me and the person from the co-op in the room organising it with the foundation. And so that was a very long time ago, and we've come a long way since then. And I've repeatedly said that I do think that in terms of supermarkets' commitment to fair trade, including it properly in the induction process and the training would be really good. But I think to us as campaigners, it's worth, I do think that shop managers are responsive, particularly in littler shops, to local people. And so that I do think that the materials are available, particularly in the co-op. And so that if your shop manager thought it was something that was important to a reasonable amount of you, then they might probably have pulled down the materials. So I think that's a good example of not being complacent about it, because the materials, we know that Co-op have done some really lovely materials that includes lots of stickers and lots of, what's it called? What's the stuff called? I've forgotten. The bunting. So they've done bunting this year, and so they clearly could have used it. And so in a way, probably we need to ask our shop managers to do that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think the person we interviewed was not the shop manager.
It was a cleaner.
He was a cleaner, wasn't he, Olin? So, I mean, I think it's just possible he's not actually even a co-op employee, I suppose, if he's a cleaner. He's subcontracted, I don't know. Anyway, but I still think it should be that everybody in a co-op shop should be familiar with fair trade. That should be the way it works. No, that's great. So that's really interesting reactions, and I very much agree with what Sophie and others have said, that it was great to see all this positive support, but there was some really quite sort of strange, little bit off message kind of things coming through. It's organic, of course, and the whole chain is ethical, the transport is ethical, and it's fine as long as it's not profitable. I mean, Sophie is the former CEO of Divine would doubtless regard not being profitable as not something to go for.
Exactly.
So there were some really interesting other messages. I'd like just to open it up a bit to ask, particularly people who are not in Brent, is there anything there which was perhaps different from what you'd expect in your area, or did it sound like it would be sounding to you in, for example, Orkney? I can see Lorna, you're from Orkney, or Joanna, she's not quite as far as Orkney, but she's pretty far north. So in your bit of the country, would the reaction have been similar, do you think, or different? Any views? Lorna?
Yep. I think for the age group that was being interviewed, I think it would be quite typical, because really it is the younger generations who have got their heads around this. Unless they've been bombarded by people like myself or their children, then I think the generations a bit older, I would say anybody sort of 50, 60 onwards probably doesn't have the knowledge that we have. And I think that is the problem, really. Sometimes I think the ways to get around that isn't always in the shop. It's maybe through the action of a fair trade group in how they promote it. In Orkney, for instance, this fortnight now, we've got huge PVC banners that we have stuck up all over the community, tied to railings and football pitches with the Fairtrade mark. And I don't know if any of you do that, but we promote it with the signs. Some years we've put Fairtrade stickers on the shelves of shops that have allowed us to do it, just to highlight where the Fairtrade is. But yeah, I would agree, very typical of what would be said.
Great.
Yeah. The Rainforest Alliance seems to be one that people think is equal to Fairtrade. We get that a lot in Orkney. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yes, I regret to say the leader of our council thought that at one time until he was put right by Janet. So yes, thank you very much. Any other comments from outside London? I see we have Totnes here, and or Joanna, or any other comments from outside?
I think from my experience, they were actually quite clued up, because a lot of the general public that you speak to, they think it's about things being recycled. They think it's about things being handmade. They think, they honestly, the fact that they identified it as something to do with paying people properly, and some of them identified it as being environmentally friendly, you're on to a bit more of a winner than a lot of the people that I've spoken to. Just for context, I've been a market trader selling fair trade products for about 15 years. So I speak to the public a lot when they don't have that level of understanding about what fair trade is. So yeah, it feels like we still have a long way to go. One of the things that worries me is that we are up to a point in an echo chamber. One of the problems with putting on all of the Fairtrade Fortnight events online is that you see the same faces over and again, which is very nice to see people again, but it's really, really important that we find other people to speak to about fair trade. And obviously somebody in Brent's doing something right, because you've managed to get through to a lot of people, so well done.
Well, I think it's a whole group of people in Brent who've been doing things, but yes, absolutely. So thank you, Joanna. I'll go to Wendy and then to Councillor Orley. Wendy, great to see you.
Thank you. When we've actually been on the high street talking to the public, we found the majority of people certainly know about fair trade. I think on one occasion, a couple of years back, there were only about 2 people who didn't, but they don't know anything about the premium. And I think it's really important to get that over to people.
That's really interesting, yes.
We'll be having a big brew on Saturday of this week. And we have a couple of people who used to live in Rwanda who will be coming, and we'll be focusing very much on coffee. And there'll be opportunity there for questions and answers, and it'll be very interesting to see what questions that brings out. We also have banners which we tie up every year so that anybody coming into the town is very aware of that too. But the one thing that we find very difficult is to recruit people to actually join the fair trade group.
Oh, yes.
Yes, people know about it, but they don't particularly want to be involved in organising anything. So I don't know if anybody else has got suggestions or ideas of how you can get around that.
No, that's a great topic, which we'll open up in a moment, because I think it's something that many of us share. But thank you, and I take your point about the premium. You're quite right. Nobody in those interviews mentioned the premium, and in fact, only one woman mentioned the community. So all the rest was focused on individual workers. Yes. So the whole sort of cooperative community emphasis of fair trade was kind of missing from people's perception. Yeah. Councillor Orley, yes.
I think that this is Fair Trade Week. We should be doing a lot more to actually highlight the fact that it's Fair Trade Week. I think it follows on to some of the responses that have been said already. Also, with the COVID pandemic over, we could do more outreach work, maybe in schools, libraries, etc., just to let people know about the logo, the Fair Trade logo more. And that could be done over any time period, because I think that we need to get the message out more than once, constantly promoting it. Yeah. So that's mine.
Great. No, totally agree. And as you know, I'm hoping to speak to a school you're a governor of before long. And I think this is interesting. It's echoing what Lorna was saying about younger people generally knowing this. An awful lot of younger people have heard about it at school, and schools are a wonderful means of getting the message out. I do agree. Partly because you talk to lots of people who are sort of sitting down and normally relatively quiet and all listening at once, which is great. But that's very interesting. Before we move on to Wendy's point about recruiting people, any other further comments on the film itself and the sort of attitudes displayed and the gap between very positive view about fair trade and ignorance or relative, well, not knowing the full story, shall we say, not ignorance. Sue. I'm afraid you're still muted, Sue.
Did anybody ask the young girl how come she was so well informed? Was it from school?
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah. No, I don't remember.
I did speak to her parents because she said she needed to get her parents' permission to be involved in the film. When I got her signature, she said, well, I better ask my parents, who were in the shop as well. And they were very, I said to her mum, who I was speaking to, gosh, your daughter's very impressive. The mother seemed also incredibly impressive. And I think it seemed to be a family who were very knowledgeable about all sorts of ethical issues. So I don't know if it was necessarily from school or from her family, but it seemed to be a family. There were another couple of children as well. And they were all quite sort of knowledgeable about things. So maybe it was from that.
Yeah, it was impressive. But I would have thought most people were just like the lady who kept saying, I'm trying, but I don't have a lot of time. And I think that's for most shoppers and most people, they're bombarded with so much information all the time. I think most people sit there, they want to, they try to, but they don't really have time. So that's quite a challenge, isn't it, I guess?
And that's why our job is partly, I think, to make it easier for people. And that's why the label is so important, isn't it? Because as we've said, the label is trusted. And so as long as people look out for the label and see it, maybe it should be a bit bigger. Councillor Orlean, you put your hand up again, I think. Unless
yes, I did. Oh, I'm unmuted. Yes, I did. And I think my point has been covered. Let me just look at my notes. Yeah, yes. My last point was that everybody knew about the bananas.
Right.
I didn't hear, and I heard a little bit about coffee and a little bit about chocolate and nothing else. So, and then I remember you said in your interview, we've got over 6,000 products. And she looked a bit surprised. So once again, that's something you need to get that across. Anyway, that was all.
No, and it was kind of ironic because there we were in the co-op, and right behind me was a freezer cabinet with ice cream, which included Ben & Jerry Fairtrade ice cream, and right next to that were a load of flowers, several of which were Fairtrade. So right there was these very different products. That's great. Yeah, thank you, Nana.
Well, thank you. I think one of the things when people say they don't have time, I mean, it's actually that taking action is quite simple. It's not that difficult. Sometimes, I mean, I was doing a presentation this afternoon as part of a church event. And I actually said, even going into a shop and asking them, you're looking for fair trade and can't find it, that's enough to trigger a response in the shop. So, and what I found at St. Dominic's, where I did something this morning, was there's a film from the Fairtrade Foundation, which is about Chocolate Has a Name. And it was and that very short film, it's 1 minute and 16 seconds. And it's basically asking young people to tweet that, chocolate is not something nameless. It comes from cocoa. People are producing it. And the film is brilliant. So again, we have to show people that it is simpler than they think. Sometimes it's simply asking. It took me 3 shops to get Fairtrade flowers because I needed Fairtrade flowers as part of my display. And it just shows, why is it so difficult? And I know we have to therefore be agitating more as consumers. And I think maybe that's something to bear in mind.
Right, as consumers as well as activists getting other people to agitate.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, great, thank you. Janice and then Lorna.
Yeah, I think when we go into the smaller shops, they always say, oh, we've got to ask my manager and manager's got to ask region. Should we be targeting the small shops, or should we be targeting head offices more so that it can cascade down a lot more? Because we're just doing the small fry at the bottom by speaking to the small shop manager, who will then be moving on in 5 months' time or whatever, and someone brand new will come in. You know, because you've mentioned the size of the logo, but you can have that on the product, but it's also not in the shop displays either, is it? You know, you mentioned the ice cream, they could have had that on the cabinet, let alone the Ben & Jerry's itself.
Yeah,
you know, yeah. But I think we need to rethink a strategy about actually targeting the higher echelons of the supermarkets.
Right, that's a really good point. And we have the pleasure of having Adam Gardner on this call. So maybe from a sort of Fairtrade Foundation perspective, before we go to Lorna, Adam, could you just say anything about what you do in the foundation to sort of target these big supermarkets at sort of headquarters level?
Yeah, evening all. Hi, Peter. That's very kind of you to call it a pleasure. Thank you. Nice to be here. And I just say I really love the film. I couldn't help but be really heartened by it, actually. And you know, I agree with the other things said. You know, we're all Fairtrade fanatics, I suppose, and it's not everyone understands all the different level of details and price and premium, but you know, one thing that struck me was, and I think something we've tried to do at Fairtrade is to try and talk, to just provide more of a platform for farmers to speak. And maybe if more people can hear from farmers talking about Fairtrade, that might be part of helping to kind of to understand on many levels. And I wonder what that looks like at the context of engaging with people at the local level. Ooh, sorry, that's my doorbell. Why don't we go to Lorna, and I'll come back and say something about the supermarkets.
Great. Okay, thanks very much, Adam. Let him get to his doorbell. Lorna, back to the Orkneys.
Yes, it was just to say that even from a fair trade, even if you're a fair trade enthusiast, it can sometimes be difficult to know where the fair trade is located, where it is. And we found even within our fair trade groups, there were some more elderly people who were saying, well, I'd love to go and buy some fair trade dates, but I don't know where to get them in Orkney. So we came up with this idea that we needed to you know, make an audit of everything. And we did that about 5 years ago. And then I was speaking to the Scottish Fairtrade Foundation last year, and I was speaking to them about it, and they then decided that they would do a Fairtrade Finders. I think the Fairtrade Foundation have done something similar, but the Scottish Fairtrade Foundation have got a map, and you can populate the map with all the products. So that's what we did for Fairtrade Fortnight for Orkney this year. We have gathered, as our Fairtrade group have gone out, and we've gone around all the shops and we've tabulated everything, and we've put it all onto this map from the Scottish Fairtrade Foundation. So now if somebody in Orkney wants to find something, they can go to that map and it comes up. It's great, actually. Yeah.
No, that sounds brilliant. And is that a map online, or is it on paper?
Yes, it's online. So you
Great.
you just need to put in Scottish Fairtrade Finders, something like that, and it comes up. It's a bit clunky because I sometimes wonder if the people who design these things are all paid to do it. Sometimes it's volunteers, sometimes it is paid people, but it is a wee bit clunky, but it's starting to be populated. So that's something that we're going to promote this week. And also we ran a challenge to ask the young people to use their phones to take photographs and to share their favourite products and put them onto our Facebook page. So we're trying to use technology because it's young people that are going to take their phones out and communicate rather than, yeah, it's to try, and then hopefully that will spread through to the older generations, that maybe their grandchild or whoever did this, and can you have a look at this? There's a great sense of community and people kind of connect. I think we're lucky up here because we do have a sense of community, and we don't have great big clothes shops. So we're promoting even the organic cotton. We're promoting small shops and what they sell at the moment as well. So I think the smaller the place you come from, the easier it is. I think it's really hard work when you come from a big city. I think it's quite a challenge.
Yeah. So Orkney is more than one island, so you have your own logistical challenges, I'm sure, as well. But,
yeah. But actually, one of our smallest islands is the best stocked in all of Orkney.
Oh, great. Oh, very good.
Yeah, so I think they use tradecraft or something.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Laura. Yeah, great. Adam, welcome back from your doorbell. You were very kind again to say us a bit about how the foundation tackles supermarkets at the sort of headquarters level.
Yes, I was. So yeah, I have a whole team of colleagues in the commercial team at the foundation who are responsible for engaging with the different companies and retailers that we work with. So each of the major retailers we'll meet with and be working with them in advance to get them to try and do stuff during Fairtrade Fortnight and just generally kind of advance their commitment. And there are some really committed individuals in some of those companies, at head office level doing that. I've certainly been invited along to meetings with whole teams of co-op staff from the head office working in lots of different teams, coming together around Fairtrade. So yeah, it's certainly something that we're working on and always, encouraging them and trying to support them to do more, both in terms of increasing the range of Fairtrade products and then talking about it as well. I think they do find it quite difficult sometimes to reach absolutely every, staff member in every store. I think the perhaps high turnover makes it hard to deliver that deep training, but you also see real champions. And I've received a co-op member pioneer pack as well, which they produce for Fairtrade Fortnight. So I think there's, as we sort of coming from the film and seeing the good level of awareness that was out there, there's a lot to build on there, but a bit more to be done. So I suppose engaging at the local store level, definitely there's a lot of power there to speak with local store managers, but don't stop there. As you were saying, Janice, I think the more we ask for these things and the more we engage at the different levels, the better.
Great. No, well, thank you very much. That's really heartening to hear. Well, A, that you're so actively engaged, as I was sure you were, but B, that actually the response at the headquarters level is so encouraging. That's great, actually. Thanks very much. Good. I'm aware that time is going to run out. I would like to raise this question that Wendy raised of how you get more people, bring more people into your local group, particularly people who are willing to do stuff. And I do know that there's quite a big difference between people who do stuff and people who, for their own reasons, wish to listen rather than more actively do stuff. Does anybody have any sort of suggestions in response to Wendy's challenge, if I can put it like that? Yeah, Joanna, you have lots of experience.
Yes, so it is a problem. One of the frustrations that I hear a lot from groups is that there's a certain demographic of people and they've been promoting fair trade in their communities for 15 to 20 years. So they started when they were about 50. So now they're about 70 and everybody in the group is the same. And they're really struggling to get anybody, and they can see that people who are younger are interested in our campaigning and they're not connecting dots between the things that they're campaigning on. So they're campaigning on fast fashion, they're campaigning on climate, they're Extinction Rebellion, all of those things. But they're not making the connection with how we fundamentally need to change the global trading system. But actually, I think they all know that we need to fundamentally change the global trading system, but they don't think that's what Fairtrade does. And it's a communication issue. It's helping them understand that actually it's a really radical concept. Making multinationals pay more than they have to for things is a really radical concept. And it's about Black Lives Matter. It's about all of these really important campaigns that younger people are keen on. One of the things that they really don't want to be doing is be sitting in a drafty church hall 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night. To find them where they are. That's what it boils down to. We need to find them where they are and talk to them where they are about fair trade and about the connections between fair trade and the things that they're interested in. So I did a project last summer, How Green Is Your T-shirt, and it was upcycling. We got young people both upcycling the T-shirts, but also we put on a fashion show and they were acting as models for us. And there was that connection between the things that they were interested in, the fast fashion and fair trade, and making those links. And you know, things like that make a difference. I'm doing an event on Monday night as part of the Choose the World You Want festival, and it's about digital activism and about how the future of fair trade campaigning is probably going to be largely a digital thing rather than us meeting monthly in a church hall. And it's a completely different way of thinking about how we find those people, because where they are online, they're in digital space. And anybody who manages a Facebook group or a Twitter feed or a fair trade organisation will realise how many more people are following them. Presumably they're interested, and that you'll get sort of 4 people to your group and 175 are following you on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And those are the people that you might persuade to do a thing. Just because they don't want to come to your meetings doesn't mean they don't want to do a thing. So that's just reaching out to them. But yeah, there are lots and lots of people that we can bring into the movement. We're not struggling to bring people to the broader trade justice movement. It's just getting them interested in fair trade and understanding what we're up to. So yeah, don't lose heart.
No, that's really helpful, Joanna. Thank you. And yeah, lots of things for us to think on there. But I'm sure that one of the benign consequences of this awful pandemic is that we have all learnt to become more comfortable operating in meetings like this, which has amazing advantages, because we couldn't have people from Totnes and Orkney in a meeting if we were only looking at a meeting together in a hall in Brent. So and indeed our own meetings have all been online for the last couple of years. So it is a very, very new and a very helpful new way of doing things, which is great. We send out a newsletter, not often enough, to 250 people, and I know from MailChimp that is actually opened by 30% of them. So something like 75 people are reading stuff, and yet our typical steering group meeting is 1/10 of that, 6 or 7 people. So it totally bears out what you're saying, Joanna, in terms of the difference between people who are interested and those who actually turn up to meetings. Time is almost out. I'd just like to check if anybody else would like to make a contribution. John, in particular, having silenced you by muting you, let me see if I can unmute you. If I can't, then you can.
He does it himself.
*6, I gather. Ask to unmute. So, John, if you'd like to make a comment, you do star and then 6 on your phone, and you should be unmuted. If you don't want to, that's no problem. Wait a moment. No, I'm not seeing any change there. Anybody else? Barbara, would you like to make any comment from what you've heard so far? Again, no pressure if you don't want to. No. Sue has raised her hand. Yes, she has indeed. Yes, Sue,
Sorry, does Barbara want to say something? I don't know, but I just I noticed the other day on Brent, on a Brent email, that there's a kind of climate network which seems to have about 2,000 people on it, and I was thinking, you know, we need to try and tilt those people to looking for fair trade and buying fair trade, and the people, you know, in the Friends of the Earth network and the sustainability group and, you know, the business kind of groups. That I think is tricky, but I think it's really critical in Brent. I mean, I don't know about anywhere else, but in terms of getting up ahead of steam towards, you know, more people knowing what fair trade is. They don't have to come to the meetings, but you would want them to be buying and looking for fair trade things and passing the message on. And I don't know what the kind of mechanism for that is.
Right.
And I haven't joined the climate network, but obviously that would be a good step, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think we found there's quite a lot of overlap in membership of fair trade and climate action locally. Just seeing Barbara's comment that she has COVID, it's very kind of you, Barbara, to take part in this at all if you've got COVID. Sympathy to you. Hope it's getting better soon, but great to have you with us. Sorry, I list Lorna. This is the last word actually, because we've 8 o'clock. We have to stop.
It was just a suggestion. In Orkney, what we tend to do to try and get involved with other groups is offer to serve them free tea and coffee, and that really works. Get in there if you're willing to do a bit of legwork and go in with free tea and coffee. You certainly make yourself popular. It's just an idea. We used to get free supplies from the co-op to do that.
That's right. I remember the days, and we used to get wonderful little bars of chocolate from Divine too. In fact, we found at student freshers' fairs and things, chocolate was a great lure also, as well as free tea and coffee. So on that optimistic note, we ought to finish, but I'd just like to thank everybody for taking part today. It's been great to see you, great discussion. And thank you again, particularly to Emily for having the idea in the first place, and for securing Maya, our wonderful film person as well, to create the film. This whole event, including the film, should be available on the foundation website if the recordings worked. So it will be something you can see later. But thanks very much indeed. Oh, and lots of applause is coming in too. So thank you very much for that. So great to see you, and goodbye. But lovely to see you all. Thanks very much indeed.